no matter what happens, I will never, ever let any harm come to you or your brother.
Who said anything about harm?
No, that's what I'm saying.
You know that somebody wants to harm us.
There's going to be
Tell
no.
me.
If someone.
I demand to know.
No, I should not have used the word harm.
Yes, but you keep mentioning the word harm.
No.
Why?
If anyone tries to you, they'll have to get through me first.
My father's going to die, and I'm going to have you to look after me. I mean, I may as well just shoot myself like mother.
Svetlana, we need to be
I
strong.
would put a lamp on a chair.
We need to be strong and never afraid.
Yeah, well, I wasn't afraid. Now I am afraid.
No, don't be, because if any harm...
God.
Hello, everybody. I am Peter Travers, and welcome to Popcorn, where we tell you what's happening at the movies. And there's a movie now called The Death of Stalin, which you might think is going to be too heavy for you, that you can't possibly deal with such a thing, and you people are crazy, because there is, even though there's a serious part of it, what happens in here is that you laugh until you can't stand it anymore. It's so great. My guest today, and I'm going to make him introduce himself so that I have it on record exactly the correct way to say his name, the pronunciation of which he changes frequently to just baffle people like me. Who are you, sir?
Yeah, this always comes up, right?
It does come up.
I say Buscemi.
You do.
Growing up, my family said Buscemi.
Buscemi, that's a new one to me.
That, I think my dad came up with that.
Yeah.
But the correct, like Sicilian pronunciation is Buscemi. So when people say Buscemi, that's very close to how I think what the real pronunciation is. So I don't usually correct people if they say Buscemi.
There we are. Then that's the way it's going to be from now on.
It won't, because I go through this all the time.
But I'm gonna, if I see you on the street,
you won't
I'm
even
gonna
remember
say,
the next time I see you.
I'm going to say, hey,
Yeah, okay.
hey, SB,
Yeah.
how are you doing now?
There you
There
go.
might
There
have
you go.
been that happening to you.
Yeah.
Anyway, Steve, or Steven, as the case may be,
Yes.
I've always thought, because you're one of my favorite actors, that
Well,
you can
thank you so
play
much.
basically anyone.
Thank you.
Khrushchev, though, in this, I thought,
yeah.
what the hell is this?
Me too.
You know, you wouldn't be the first person that came to mind when this would
I
happen.
don't think I'd be the first, second, third, or fourth, or maybe even fifth person.
Do you often take your
But-
shoe off and bang on tape?
It could happen today.
It could happen today.
So-
yeah, you could.
Yeah, when I read the script, and when I was first told about it, I was like, Khrushchev. Like I thought it was a mistake. Like that's not who they want me for. And
It's your Russian background, I think, that you don't have at all.
Yeah, I don't know. I read the script, and it was a very thick script, and it was like an epic, I mean, it was funny, but there was a lot in there, and I was just intimidated by the whole thing, The only thing that put me at ease was there was a note in the beginning that said that that none of the actors would be required to do a Russian accent.
Which I think is great. Everybody's talking the way they talk.
Yeah, I mean, that would have been the last straw for me. I was like, no, I can't do, And, but still, I just thought, I don't know how I could pull this off. And I said to my agent and my manager, I said, I'm really flattered, and it's, but I don't think I can do this. They said, why don't you at least have a conversation with Armando Iannucci? And I really thought, all right, I'm going to call Armando, and I don't know how I'm going to tell him, but I'm going to tell him that I don't think I'm really not right. I don't know why, it's, and we just had the most easygoing, lovely conversation. And by the end of it, I was just, he says, look, I would not be offering you this part if I didn't think you can do it. And he was just such a lovely guy. I thought, yeah, this is crazy. I have to do this. I can't, I have to get over my own fear. And I think it's good sometimes when you have fear of doing something, because those are probably the things that you should be doing, taking on roles that are challenging.
Well, because we see him, I mean, there are a lot of British actors in this as well.
Yeah.
Now, we're always accustomed to Brits playing any kind of nationality,
Right.
which they could do in a British accent. But to hear the American, the Brits, Michael Palin, Simon Russell, Beale, all of these wonderful, Jeffrey Tambor, everybody in this movie
Yeah.
that you would say, that doesn't fit.
Right.
And yet it does. It takes you about 5 minutes to adjust to it, and then you're just
Yeah,
left.
I think once you sort of, are on board with it, and, it's obviously a comedy. It's a very dark comedy, and it's not a comedy throughout. I mean, it does go to some, dark places.
Well, people are dying. Stalin
Yeah,
did have
so
his
that's-
kill list,
yeah.
which was...
It's a very serious subject, but I thought it was brilliant that the original producers went to Armando. It's from a graphic novel, so it has this like comic book graphic novel feel to it, and it reminded me of like Dr. Strangelove.
It's a lot like it in a way. Yeah, it is.
Yeah, and
It's
if
a
you-
satire.
Yeah, I mean, if you remember at the time, the other movie that came out about nuclear, the threat of nuclear war was Failsafe. Another great director, Sidney Lumet. But for some reason, Strangelove is the one that I think that has endured. And yeah, I mean, Kubrick is genius. But I also think it's because of the humor. I think the humor, it lets people in a way that sometimes if the subject matter seems overly serious, I think people can, maybe not want to go there. But if there's humor in it, and if there's biting humor, and if it's, like you say, a satire, and I love the fact that they were taking, Stalin down, like in this film. It's a totally irreverent, portrayal.
I'm glad they
as
weren't.
it should
It wasn't
be.
a tribute.
As it should be, of course. I know,
Right, yep.
but it could have been a serious drama, and and but I love the fact that it was, funny.
I love the early part of the movie too, where Stalin's making everyone watch John Wayne movies.
And that was true. I mean, he towards the end, he just would invite them all to his his country home, and things wouldn't start till like 1 a.m. Like they'd eat dinner at 1 a.m. And then by like 2 or 3, then he'd say, "Let's watch another John." It was always the same John Ford movie, whatever it was. And they'd have to be up all night until dawn, and drink with him.
And you have to stay awake. And if you
Stay
say the
awake.
wrong thing, you could be on the next
Yeah.
day's murder list.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think what Khrushchev figured out for himself was that Stalin liked him, and I think he genuinely liked Stalin. But he knew that if he could make Stalin laugh, that if he could, that's how he stayed in his good graces. He was a good storyteller. He was a good talker. And he wasn't, above if Stalin wanted him to, do some, like dance, some folk dance, he'd get up and do it.
Fine. You couldn't say no.
Yeah.
Yeah. You just don't do any of that
Right.
to do it.
Yeah.
With you, Steve, you played villains. You played, maybe Nucky Thompson has a little Stalin in him. I think, he was about power, wasn't he? He wanted to have that control.
I mean, that was such an interesting character to play because he loved being a politician, Nucky. And
It's an empire. It's a boardwalk empire.
Yeah, he had this empire, and for him, I think he genuinely liked to be amongst the people and do favors, and kind of that's how he sort of operated. Was that he was a very social guy, and he could he was sort of like a fixer, and he could do things. And then when Prohibition came into effect, he saw that there was a way to make all of this money. But I think his downfall is that he really had then to become, not just a politician, but he had to become a gangster, and that was his downfall because he really wasn't up for it, and he sort of lost touch with the people and became very sort of inward and secluded and paranoid, and in the end, he wanted all this power and money, but
Yeah.
it did him in.
Well, losing touch with the people
Yeah.
is a problem politicians have in general,
Yeah.
but that anybody has who reaches a kind of position there's some power that comes with it. And yet you've always seen, you started basically, I don't know if being a fireman was the first thing you did. Was that?
It was one of the best jobs I've ever had, one of the earliest jobs, but I had a lot of jobs before that.
But what was inside of you that made you say, I want to do this? Because it's such a job of serving, and it really is.
Yeah, so
dangerous job.
Yeah, for me, I have to say, it wasn't like when I was a kid, I wanted to grow up and be a fireman and save people and help people. It was more that my dad was a sanitation worker. And he really believed in civil service jobs, that they were good paying jobs, you had security. He understood that I wanted to be an actor, but he thought acting's a tough job, and not a lot of security in show business. And so when my brothers and I turned 18, he made us take whatever civil service test came up. And for me, it was the fire department. And so I really took it just to please him, to sort of, get him off my back. And it took 4 years for them to get to my name. And by that time, I was working as a furniture mover. I wasn't really doing much acting. I thought, I'm going to take this job because I want to do something different. And it was a good paying job. And I think while I was on the job, I then really learned what a great and important job it is and what it means to be a firefighter. And that's something that stuck with me. It's still in me, even though I only did it for 4 years.
4 years is a chunk of time.
Yeah, but I feel privileged, that I was able to do that job, be amongst those people who did it, and now to be reconnected with them, because after 9/11, or during 9/11, that whole time, I reconnected with my old firehouse, and I'm still in touch with them.
And you went back to help during those days. Is it a terrifying job? I mean, going into a fire, it just seems it would be really.
I ended up making, Liz Garbus and I, the director, we ended up making a film, a documentary about the fire department. And one thing that firefighters will tell you, that there's no such thing as a routine fire. Anytime you enter a burning building, no matter how many times you've done it, it can turn on a dime, and you can find yourself in a life and death situation.
In movies and TV, you basically are faking that situation sometimes, but all the times, actually.
Yes.
Yeah. But you have the experience. Did that inform what you were, what you became as an actor?
There's something similar, and I've talked about this before. When I was doing, when I was on the fire department, I was also doing a lot more theater, and I found myself that I would go through the same anxieties that I went through as an actor and as a firefighter.
Going on stage.
If you're putting, and I had firefighter friends that told me, I'll run into a burning building anytime. I could not go up on stage in front of an audience. It's scary. But to do live theater is sometimes terrifying. And I remember I would feel that same terror, of right before I would go on stage. And then what would carry you through, or would carry me through, was the teamwork, being with other actors. It's the same thing with firefighting. You're depending on your fellow firefighters to do this. And once you're doing it, the nervousness kind of goes away, because now you're in it. And once you've completed it, if you've completed it successfully, there's no greater feeling in the world, and it's a shared feeling. You have a bond with the people that you went through this incredible experience with. So that's where I found it, acting and firefighting similar.
When people recognize you, do they recognize you for certain roles, or are they just saying you're the guy in the wood chipper in Fargo? What do they say? What do they recognize you most for?
Certainly Reservoir Dogs, Coen Brothers films, although recently I was on a flight, and the flight attendant was, she recognized me, but she didn't know from what. And, she was saying, oh, how do I know you? What, I know you were in something. What was it? And I didn't want to, because when that happens to me, usually if I start reeling off my resume, they'll go, no,
that's not it.
And I have to think of okay, so what did this person see that, and I just took, I went, I said Fargo. I don't know why, I just went, you know, I said Fargo, and she looked at me and she went, the TV series? I think she thought I was lying because maybe she watches the show and she's like, you're not in that. But she didn't know it was a film. And then later she went, you were in Boardwalk Empire. And I said, oh, yeah, oh, okay. You
We found one.
Yes.
Now can we stop?
Yeah.
You know, yes, before we have to go through the whole
Right,
resume
yeah,
and
yeah.
decide what it is to do that. But you have a son.
Yes.
Growing up with you, with Steve Buscemi, with people recognizing you and knowing who you are, what was his take on having a father who was in this business?
I don't know. I always tried to shield him from the business as best I could.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I remember when the film Armageddon came out, and he was only in first grade, and I just thought it would be weird for him to see my face, you know, on like a bus stop, because they were doing like all these, you know, there were these group shots of all of us, but then they also had these like single shots of each character with like a saying, you know, like Ben Affleck, you know, his character, he's doing it for love, and Bruce Willis, he's doing it for the glory or something, and my character said, Rockhound, he's doing it for the money. And I thought it was a little too.
That's not the message.
A little too close to home. Like, yeah, it was really a well-paying job, and I loved. It was a lot of fun to do, but I didn't necessarily want to see myself in you know, like at the local bus stop in Brooklyn. And I called my manager and publicist. I said, "Do you think they could not put those posters up like where I live in Brooklyn?" And they said, we've never gotten a request like this before. Usually actors want this, you know. And I said, no, I just don't want to be walking him to school and having to explain like this. And so I don't know what, you know, you'd have to ask him about how he really feels about it. But I would try and protect him.
Well, he's older now. He's
that.
protected.
He's older.
Yes.
Yes.
But, you know, I would just imagine seeing you in Con Air would be
Yeah.
even more disturbing. You know?
Yeah, he wasn't old enough to see it at the time, but
Yeah.
he's seen it since. And he actually he loves it. Yeah.
Well, you'll do your funny movies, your Adam Sandler movies,
Yeah.
the big studio things like that, the indies. You directed. You did when you were on The Sopranos. You directed Pine Barrens,
yeah,
which
I
was
mean,
one of the great pieces.
I got into
Who
this.
are you? What do you want to settle in being?
I got into this business because I love acting. I love actors, and I love writers and directors. And you know, I would never want to limit myself. You know, I mean, I was doing a lot of independent film at one time, and I love doing independent film. But for a while, I was, you know, known as just like the indie guy. You know, and so I was nervous, you know, to take a movie like Airheads. You know, that was the first movie I did. It was a Michael Lehman film, but it's the first time I worked with Adam Sandler. And I thought, is this going to change my reputation as the indie guy? And I went, who cares? I don't want to always be the indie guy. I want to do, I want to do a lot of different work.
But you also are you have a musical career.
Do I?
You do. I say you do. We talked about this before.
Yeah, I did Stanley Tucci in his film The Imposters. He had me sing in that film. I played a character named Happy Franks, who was the the entertainer on a cruise ship, who was very depressed and would start the song and then break down crying. And you mentioned before
the Lou Reed thing with Broadway
thing.
song,
Yeah,
you know,
yeah.
on the Raven album,
Yeah,
that's there.
yes,
You know,
yeah.
what did Lou Reed just see you one day and say, Steve, what you need to do is sing on my album?
I don't know what, you know, well, his producer, Hal Wilner, I don't know what, you know, why they thought that I could actually sing, you know. They, and Hal has done this to me on another occasion. He had an evening in Brooklyn where he invited all these, you know, wonderful singers and me to sing Disney songs. And I sang, Hi ho, it's off to work we go.
Excellent. Well, this is your first time on this show. It always ends in song.
Yes.
Whatever is in your head, you know.
Whatever's in my head.
It could be what Khrushchev was actually humming, you know, on his way to work each day.
I wish I knew a good Russian work song. But
no.
there is a song, you know, that I remember that it's like a World War II song, about World War II, and it's about, you know, dictators. And so I'm going to change it a little bit.
Okay.
Because this is not, Stalin, I don't think, was a part of the song. And
It's okay.
It's okay. But
As
I'm
long
gonna,
as you got a dictator in
but
there.
I'm going to put, no, there's three of them. So, and
Right.
I'm sure you know the song, and I'm sure you know, like the dirty version of it. I'm not going to do the dirty version.
I'll do
So
that in
it's-
my head then.
Okay, so it's whistle while you work. Hitler is a jerk. Mussolini was a meanie, and Stalin, not much worse. See, I cleaned it up.
You really did.
I'm sure you know.
But you can get that, people. Steve Buscemi sings Disney with his own lyrics. I think it would be a huge sale.
Yeah.
Steve, it's a pleasure having you on
Thank
the
you
show.
so much,
Really
Peter.
is
I really
great. And
appreciate
this
it.
movie, everybody needs to be seeing this because
you.
it's going to be good for your soul.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Steve.
Appreciate it.